to be here today, and thank you to our speakers. We're having some Wi-Fi issues, so we are going to have one more candidate join us, so hopefully she can get her Wi-Fi sorted out and we'll get started. We just wanted to let everyone know that we did reach out to all the candidates. Dr. Weber and Mr. Marco could not make it, but we do have a video that we will show, and then we will get started with the candidates who are actually here.
I need to allow.
We can also just go ahead and show it at the closing.
And.
Yeah, we'll show it at the closing.
Thanks.
So we can get started. So we are letting everyone just have an opening statement so that everyone can hear about who you are, what you are, why you're running, and just learn more about you from you.
And how long is that? Like 2 minutes?
We're gonna give you 3 to 4 minutes.
Oh, okay. So my name is Shane Suzanne Parmalee. I'm third generation San Diegan, raising my kids here in '79. I'm a single mom. I'm a teacher. I'm a community organizer, activist. I have been teaching for over 20 years now, and about a decade ago, I realized I needed to get more involved outside of the classroom in order to affect some of the changes that I wanted to see happen that were impacting my students and their families. And, you know, my family too, let's be real. I'm a single mom. My youngest was finally a little bit old enough, like 4 or 5, so I could get more involved. And I decided to get more involved by getting more active within my teachers union, because that's the world, you know, that's how we advocate for kids and better conditions for our students. And over the last 10 years, I've just kind of escalated from there. So it started at the local level, but now at this point, I'm elected to leadership positions at the local, state, and national level. So I'm currently within San Diego County. I am the vice chair for our service center. We represent 42 districts in the county. I was PAC treasurer, so the last county board of supervisor, or not PAC treasurer, PAC chair, ran the last county board of education races. We ran independent expenditures for that because we understand how important it is to have good people in good spots making decisions for our school districts. I am at the state level. I am active on the political involvement committee. Now I've been on different committees over the last 9 years. And so I spent the last 9 years looking at state legislation and a variety of capacities. So whether it's looking at student support services, how we have police officers on campus, the amount of counseling, PERT teams, wraparound services, how housing and impacts our students, or the unavailability of affordable housing at all income levels, healthcare and the lack thereof, a variety of basically any issue that impacts our students that they bring to school. The California Teachers Association generally has policy on, or if we haven't had policy, I've written our version of legislation to have us write policy so that we can take public positions on these issues and legislation when it comes forward. So like public banking. I wrote an MBI a couple of years ago that we would write policy supporting public banking, or like access to Wi-Fi, that we would have a free access to the internet, things like that. So I'm running for this position because this would sort of be a continuation of the work that I've been doing. It's a natural progression. I understand legislation. I understand the state budget. 40% of the general fund goes towards public education. So the impact of like tax credits or not adequately taxing billion-dollar multinational corporations or billionaires, how that shrinks our budget at the state level and then is a reduction in services. So we've had this economic boom for the last decade here in California, but it seems to have missed the majority of people who are working. A third of our residents in California qualify for Medi-Cal, even though they're working full time. They make so little, they qualify for state-sponsored healthcare. And we need to be making sure that these companies that are extracting billions of dollars in wealth from California every year are actually contributing their fair share to taxes and then paying their workers appropriately, so that the taxpayers like us are not subsidizing the employees of billion-dollar corporations who can afford to pay their employees and just choose not to. So I talked, and Mika's finally here.
That was perfect timing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Mika.
Oh, is she frozen?
Oh no.
Okay,
There we go.
It's working now, yeah.
Tech.
We can't hear you though.
You can't hear me. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh, they're a little like.
Can you hear me?
Almost not at all.
Okay. Let's see.
It's like there's a microphone that's plugged in, but it's not near you.
Okay, maybe I'll scoot it closer. I don't know what's going on. Can you all hear me? Maybe I'll yell.
Yeah, if you when you were really close, yeah.
Okay. Sorry that you guys get to see me close up and personal. Is it my turn to?
Yeah, so you just have like between 3 to 4 minutes to give an opening statement, just to let us know who you are, why you're running, and we're glad that you can make it even with the tech issues.
Yes, thank you all for being so patient, and thank you for holding this space. This is actually one of the forums that I'm excited about, just because I love when young people are leading. I am the executive director of a youth-led activism, organizing, and advocacy organization called Generation Justice. We have been featured in Teen Vogue and nationally for the work that we've done throughout the 79th district, throughout San Diego, and throughout California, really around criminal justice, public safety, reform, around gun violence and community violence prevention and intervention. We do a lot of work around whenever there are young people who are being harmed and need help and assistance, we come in. But we really work with everyone. And that is kind of the scope of work that I've been doing. I am a conflict resolution advisor and public safety advisor. I also help to lead how restorative justice and restorative practices are implemented countywide. I have been in the mental health field for I don't want to date myself, but over a decade. And then I moved into the criminal justice system as a juvenile justice counselor. I really found my love for working with young people who most folks don't really want to work with. And the young people who are seen as the most difficult, I truly love and have embraced. And that's why I kind of fell into juvenile justice and stayed there, really getting young folks to understand that they have the power, getting adults to understand when young people are in a space, their voices should be the loudest voices in the room, and really making sure that young people have all the skills, tools needed to really utilize their power to get policy change, to put their voice in positions of power, to hold positions of power. And so that's a lot of the work that I do. And I'm looking forward to this forum and this conversation.
Thank you so much. We are very excited to have both of you here. And so you both touched upon some issues that we are going to talk about here today. And so we just want to take a moment and delve a little bit deeper into the ones that March for Life San Diego is especially concerned with. So the first thing I want to talk about is, gun violence prevention is a very broad issue. And this year, our chapter has 3 main focuses. So it's safe storage, IRPA laws, and background checks. And these 3 focuses are policy focuses. And so I just want to go into these and see how you guys stand with these. So the first question is, what are your plans to enforce safe storage laws and to strengthen background checks? And we'll give you 2 minutes each to talk about this. So
you cut out for one of them when you said the 3 things you were doing.
Oh yeah, sorry. So IRPA laws, background checks, and safe storage. And
IRPA This is why it's good. I like to have the questions written down. Ursula, I'll let Mika go first.
So, being a person that has worked with March for Our Lives and so many other gun violence and community violence prevention organizations and intervention, I have been a true ally in regards to safe storage and in regards to background checks and also making sure that people are mentally stable and have the ability to and the education to own a gun. And so, whether it be sitting on the board of advisors for the city attorney's office, and then ultimately working with you all and others around the safe storage laws, I have been right there. But I have to be like completely transparent and honest about certain things. So, at one of these city council meetings, I talked about how I come from a family that owns multiple guns. My little sister, I'm afraid of guns, but my sisters all know, and they're younger. They know how to shoot, and they're educated. They go through training and all of that. And I talk about how many times when we get certain laws passed and policy passed in communities of color, these laws are not implemented on a fair and just level. And so we see some of the same results because only one community is being held to this policy and standard. So as I'm advocating for and on certain issues, being an ally, I'm also at the forefront and leading in areas around policy inequities and the implementation and the criminalization of whole communities. And so that's the area in the space in which I operate is advocating for these common sense laws that are necessary and needed, but also making sure that there is oversight, making sure that I am also advocating for communities of color to say what we're not going to do is pass these laws and then only see people of color being criminalized and not having the resources to be able to even meet the policy requirements. And I think that's the space and area in which I operate, and that oversight and really looking through every policy that we are advocating for through an equity and equal lens.
Okay, thank you so much.
So back in 2018, right, when we did the first March for Our Lives, and I helped organize the walkout at my school. Actually designed curriculum for a couple weeks leading up to it to, number one, educate students on what the petition said that we were signing at the time, the 3 asks, which were, and I'm like looking at it because it's on my computer, I pulled it up. It's the, ban on assault rifles, the prohibiting of high capacity magazines, and closing the loopholes in the background checks. And the as far as like the background check, like obviously, yeah, that's a thing. It shouldn't, in Georgia, what we saw last week was you can buy a gun in the same day, but you can't register to vote and vote in the same day. So California has done a much better job than other states when it comes to background checks. That's a no-brainer for me. I think the bigger issue is sometimes things get through the cracks, and there are not oftentimes enough state staff to follow up on things. So I've heard of several cases where somebody had passed a background check, and then months and months later, somebody from the county shows up because they're finally had figured out that there was something that they had missed in the background check and that the person wasn't supposed to have a weapon in their possession. So having enough state and county employees to actually do the work that goes with the legislation is often a big issue for policy or legislation to actually be implemented properly. Mika's absolutely right. A lot of times laws get written and then they're only applied to a certain group of people in a racist fashion. So making sure that we have equity in the application of all laws. And then as far as gun storage, making gun storage, I honestly think we should have a sponsored program for, like there've been other programs like that, like you could trade in your gun and get something, but we should do something along the lines of a very highly subsidized gun storage. Because you'd asked about gun storage and how we're enforcing that, correct? Yeah, that was the second word. So creating very low or no cost ways to access gun storage, and make sure and training opportunities so that material, weapons are stored properly. Did that answer your questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks both of you. And just before moving on, you both talked about equity and how these laws aren't equally enforced for everyone. And totally, that's one of the things that March for Our Lives is constantly also talking about. And so I was just wondering if you could expand more on how we can ensure that these laws are enforced equally for everyone.
Yeah. So I think there's a few different ways. And I want to say this in the most delicate way I can possibly say it. I think, when particularly our white allies are fighting to push certain policies and laws, really making sure that you're working with not just the Mikas, but like the folks that you do work with, the Bishop Bowsers and other folks, so that when we are creating or writing or pushing policy, we can look and make sure that there's nothing in there that would potentially harm one particular community. And then also making sure that after you get these laws passed or these policies passed, that we a lot of us sit on oversight boards or advisory boards, but sometimes and these are even policies that communities of color push for, where we definitely have to go back to the table and say, look, this is not working, and these are the areas in which we see these things not working, and here's what the data says and here's what the information says. So I think it's also that, like, transparency and accountability and oversight piece that is really important. And then not advocating for policies out of a position uh, of ignorance or privilege, but really acknowledging the areas in which this could really hurt someone. And I've even, me being a person of color, I've even been frustrated with certain community violence happening. And I have been one of those folks who's like, we need to do X, Y, and Z, right? And then I had to come back to the table and say, hold on, this is not being implemented properly. And how do we write that into policy itself to make sure that those who are enforcing these policies stay within the stipulations in which we have created? And I think that really is that community involvement we're constantly talking about, and that oversight, because what will happen is we'll advocate for something, we'll get it passed, and then we go on to the next thing. And now, a lot of people are being harmed, and we're still trying to get rid of certain policies right now to this day that are systemically racist, that might have had, and I say this all the time, in the Black community, when we were having a lot of issue around what people wanted to call gang violence, I don't call it that. I say community violence, because it's not about the gangs, it's about individual people and certain things taking place. But when we were having a lot of issues back in the day, our grandparents, our elders pushed for the district attorney to put forth certain policies. And these policies to this day are criminalizing whole communities and contributing to mass incarceration, and the school to prison pipeline. And so they thought that it was going to be this protection for our community. And in reality, it ended up hurting us deeply, and we're still trying to dismantle that. And so we have to be very conscious about looking down the pipeline at these policies that we are pushing to get passed. And I think that's, like, on the surface level, the areas in which allies and we can work together to ensure that that happens.
Can you just repeat the question so I make sure I answer it?
Yeah, it's just a follow-up question on how you can ensure that all these laws are being enforced equally for everyone.
So to enforce them equally, equitably, number one, before laws or policies are put forward for a vote, I agree with Mika. We need to have input from a variety of groups, and we need to make sure we're seeking out groups that disagree with each other, because that represents all the community voices. There are a lot of within the whole, we need to disarm everybody within the BIPOC and queer community. It's like we're not necessarily convinced everybody should have to give up all their guns, since we're usually the ones who are targeted for the violence. So if you look at why California became a state that banned open carry, it was literally in response to the Black Panthers showing up in Sacramento open carrying weapons into the Capitol building. So the reason why California is not open carry was a way to police Black people and stop the Black Panthers to their push for self-policing their community and to push back on police violence. I think we obviously need to make sure we're collecting racial data on enforcement. So just like anything else, if you're looking at, okay, so this law has been enforced, if you're not collecting the racial data, you can't see the disparity in the way the laws are being enforced on certain groups over other groups of people. And then I think in general, we need to just embed the circular, like a cyclical process within all laws or policies, that we have a designated, we revisit it, we reflect on how it's going, and we revise it to make sure it's actually achieving the stated goals. And that's in general with all legislation in California. It should be an ongoing process of improvement, as opposed to, whew, we did that, check that off the list and move on. Because there's always unintended consequences, and there's always some new, hey, we could improve it that way. But unless we embed that into our system and we normalize that as a practice, then it's a lot of band-aid legislation, and that doesn't achieve systemic change.
Thank you. Yeah, so another follow-up question that's related to this is, we have to talk about mental health, because 60% of gun deaths in the United States are because of suicide. So I am wondering what you can do in your position in the state assembly to make sure that people actually are able to get the help that they need, and that the help that they get actually does something.
Yeah. I don't know if we're going in order or it doesn't matter, but okay. So I think working in the mental health field for such a long period of time, I seen a shift in our county, San Diego County, and mental health is global. But San Diego County really started to shut down a lot of the facilities that were up and running, and that was not due to financial reasons, because really the county are hoarders of money. But so as a state representative, I think I would really be looking at the same things I look at now. Who has what resources? So right now the county has multiple boards that are overseeing some of the things that we are going to be doing around mental health. One of those things that we were really advocating for was not only for us to have more PERT clinicians out in the field, but also for folks to have cool down locations throughout the whole entire county. And so, as a state representative, I would really look at the areas in which, as a state, we can use state funds to build that in our budget to have cool down locations, to make sure that people who are dealing with mental illness have a place to go immediately. We see a lot of these things, and I always say this, like when we're talking about suicide, and I'm trying to either de-escalate someone or get them to really rethink some of their mindsets and the decision that they are about to make around taking their own life. And I say, you don't want to die, you want the pain to stop. And many times there's no one to actually talk to, and there's no one actually meeting the needs of people. And so this pain grows and festers. And we need to treat mental health just like we treat our regular health. When we are in emergency state, we need to have an emergency place where folks can go, because that time frame makes all of the difference. And so they don't want to take their life. They want the pain to stop. And if we start to treat the root and get to the root of the pain, then they'll rethink making this horrific long-term decision. And I think that is where, on a state level, I think a lot of times we get people in positions of power who are just about the optics and about the power itself, and they are so disconnected from the people and people's pain and experience, right? And so that is what I want to bring to the state level. There's not one area that the state handles that I have not worked on the front lines, right? And know from experience in my work experience, what is necessary to address these issues. And a lot of these things are things that we've talked about on a city, local level, things that we've talked about on the school. We talk about counselors, not cops, things that we've talked about on a county level around these cool down and more perk clinicians. But then thinking about statewide, what we can be implementing and put in our budget. And then how, if the county is not willing to do it, what are we willing to do as representatives within our own districts that are dealing with this, public health crisis, and how they are treating people and providing resources. And so I'm think out the box. I don't see too many state officials who are willing to actually put some type of mental health facility within their district. That is one of the things that I want to do, that is, overseen by my office and my department, because of my experience in the mental health issue and knowing what is necessary and the time frame that will make all the difference. So that's a few things.
So there was some laws, and I can't name them specifically, so I apologize for not having all the details. There were some laws that changed a few years back that required mental health and other facilities to upgrade their retrofitting for earthquake status. And that ended up reducing a lot of numbers of beds, not just in hospitals, but in like outpatient treatment or group home type things. So that was one of the reasons why we did see a reduction. And I do want to revisit that to figure out some workarounds or some temporary solutions to get us through the whatever the hiccup is that has prevented anybody from opening these facilities. We need to normalize mental health checkups, just like we normalize physical health checkups. Like checkups are checkups, and we really need to destigmatize when we're having emotional or mental health issues, like as if the brain is not just another organ that's impacted by our biochemistry and our hormones, because that's what it is. A lot of the stress and mental health issues our neighbors and us, we are all experiencing, stem from the massive inequity in our society and the fact that you can work and never get ahead. So also addressing those will help produce better outcomes. You see, the concept of, it's very American. We live to work, as opposed to in other countries where you work to live. Like your main purpose in life is not producing money for your boss. It's not going to work so you can maybe, scramble enough to pay your bills and just barely survive. Because those, when we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, most of society is down at the very bottom. So it's like just worrying about the basics of safety, food, shelter, and we can't even get up here to the, what do I want to be? Pursuing self-realization, and, fulfilling our potential, because we have such an opportunity gap in our society between people who have a lot and a lot of people who have almost nothing. or not enough. So I think we also, from a school, from a K-12 or a pre-K college, we need to do a better job of pushing wraparound services into schools and having enough counselors, because right now we don't. Counselors are there to do programming and maybe write letters of rec as people go off to college. There's very little counseling that counselors actually have time to do. And so you can't expect one counselor per 500 students to actually be doing any counseling on campus. We need to mandate paid sick and personal days for every single job so that people can just take a day off if they want. Like, I need a day off, and they just take a day off, and they don't have to worry about getting fired or not being able to pay their bills. And in general, the county level, we need to hire more staff. So I think our social workers in the county are like twice over their caseload, and there's no consequence for that. So we need to hire additional staff. We need to pay our people better. Like, the people doing these difficult jobs do not make very much, and they're usually required to have a master's degree. So that's pretty messed up. We need to increase the pipeline for more trained professionals so that we actually have enough counselors. Because right now, the wait time to actually see somebody once you're in trouble and willing to ask for help is way too long. So it shouldn't take you weeks or months to get an appointment with a mental health professional when you're in crisis, or you're like, hey, I need some counseling. That should be something like getting any other appointment through your medical provider. And if we create the pipeline for therapists and more counselors, we'll have to create more high-skilled trained jobs here in California and just increase the overall general quality of life for all of our residents.
Thank you so much, both of you. Another topic that I wanted to bring up is youth involvement, of course, because we are a youth-led organization. And I know that both of you have worked with youth, but I'm wondering how you are going to use this in an elected position and how involved youth are going to be able to be.
Yeah, so a few things, and I'm going to mix kind of these questions together because I want to elaborate on the last question as well. So I released my 100-day plan last week. And within that 100-day plan, I talk about having a community advisory or district advisory board. And then having a separate district advisory board, which is the youth advisory board. And this group will be reflective, this board will be reflective of the district in which I serve. Having a representative from each city, whether it's a separate city, and then within those different towns, like we have town councils. But everyone would sit on this board and they would be the ones that would be my advisors. And so I really, believe like my work, even within my campaign right now, it's young people, for the majority. And I'm not one of those people that just say, oh, we're working with young people because it looks good and the optics are great. Like, young people really lead in everything that I do. I have young people taking leadership. And not to say things don't happen, but I believe everything is a learning and teaching moment. I believe that youth are not just our future; they're our right now. And so every part of my work, I contribute part of that to young people, and that will not change. From the young people that I hire, depending if they're interns. Right now, I know that the previous person who held this seat did not pay their interns. We do not pay our interns in the campaign just because we are like the most grassroots. If you guys looked at the numbers, we are, so we're making a lot happen with a little. But one of the things that will happen, that will change in this seat once I'm there, is that our interns will be getting paid. Not only will our interns be getting paid, but I am willing. I always tell young people when I'm writing a recommendation letter or anything, or they're asking me for advice, I say, unfortunately, in this society, people have you go and spend a lot of money on school, and then you graduate, and then they say, oh, you have the degree, but you don't have the experience. Or you work and get all of this experience, but then you were trying to survive and you didn't get the degree. And so most times they're requiring you to have both. And for me, I really want to be that person that young people know I can go work on her team in her office and get the experience to move on and do greater things, or even take over after I leave. And that is how I'm constantly operating. Like, I don't do this work for myself. I do it for young people in paving the way and creating a foundation. And once I'm in that seat, that won't change. But to go a little further back, I just wanted to address one of the things that we did on a couple of school campuses, and one of the things that I do in the restorative justice facilitation cases is, and these are some pretty serious cases. I bring young people who graduated and got all of their charges dropped back in to help co-facilitate cases with me. And so this is another area for those who want to become lawyers, for those who love the criminal justice, want to become a judge, or love restorative justice and want to be a conflict resolution facilitator. I bring them along, and so they get on the job training as well. And I don't see me doing anything differently in regards to young people. Once I get in that seat, I will now have the resources to pay them what they deserve, though.
Could you repeat the question? I have youth involvement and youth impact, and that's not what you asked. What was?
Yeah, that's good. I was just wondering how you are going to use youth in your platform and the experiences that youth are going to be able to have because of you.
Oh, youth in my platform. So one of the obviously the reason why I'm running has to do with youth. Like, this is what I've been seeing for the last 20 years, and whether or not I feel like Sacramento has repeatedly missed the mark on a lot of legislation. They have there's been a lot of unintended consequences, or groups of people who've been left out, or like it sounded good on paper, but they didn't talk to anybody really clearly who was going to be implementing or seeing the consequences. And a lot of times it's been interesting. I've been trying to, like, as I've gotten more involved in the Democratic Party and I go into spaces when I'm at meetings, a lot of times politicians will say, yes, we're talking with the district. And I'm like, well, the district aren't actually in the classroom, and their perception of how things are going is slightly different from those of us who live on Planet Classroom. So if you want to, see how things are going, go talk to the teachers and the students. Like, they're the ones who are living what this policy is. Or teachers are scrambling to try and get resources for students that, everybody showed up for the photo op and patted themselves on the back and checked it, said, problem solved, we passed this piece of legislation. And schools are still scrambling to provide resources for students, and the rest of the community thinks that the situation's been handled, and it absolutely has been not handled. So the impact of youth on my platform is that's pretty much the whole impact on my platform. So when it comes to the environment, like, we should stop taking money from fossil fuel companies, because when the Democrats take money from fossil fuel companies, guess what? We don't seem to make as much progress as we keep saying we're going to make when we're holding press conferences or announcing these plans that some far off date we're going to achieve this goal, after the elected politician who's saying, yay, we did this, they're not even going to be in office anymore. Like, we have all these politicians who take credit for work that hasn't been done yet because they got some resolution passed, but they're not going to be there later to make sure the work gets done. When we look at housing, so we want housing or how much college costs. Like, I'm in favor of fully funded education, preschool through college. Public universities and colleges in California used to be free. If you were an in-state student, they were free. Tax dollars paid for that. And as a result, people stayed in California. So now we have a generation of kids and I have a senior, I have a kid in college, graduating, trying to go to school, and then have to get a job that pays off the student debt and then also pays for the unaffordable housing that's available in the community. So we need free public colleges. We need low and zero interest loans so students can take out loans to pay for living expenses, so that we do not have a disparate graduation rate or the length of time it takes different groups to graduate based on their parents' income level, which is based on, generational transfer of wealth, which is based on racism and the history of racism in our country. So in order to address that, we need to create the opportunities so that all students have the ability to go to college and to pay their living expenses and graduate with little to no debt. And then be able to get a job and stay in California and have housing that matches their income level. We need single payer. We need Medicare for all. Every single person in our state, the 5th largest economy in the world, should be able to go to the doctor and not have to worry about going bankrupt. I shouldn't have to hear from my students for the last 20 years that they're sick, but they can't go to the doctor yet. We're waiting till their mom is off on Saturday and they're going to TJ because that's the only place they can afford medical care. That's not okay. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. We have the money. It's just being siphoned off by the top 1%. So pretty much all of the legislation and policy I see through, like, how is this impacting my kids, my students? How is this going to make California look a generation from now? Will my kids be able to stay in the state and raise their kids? These types of things. And then as far as youth involvement, that's a given. It's not, I can't imagine a world where that doesn't happen, because that's my daily reality with, like, working with students and talking with students, and then having my own kids who are students. You have to create, number one, if you're not talking with people, the rank and file members of your society, your community, you don't really know what's going on and how your policies are playing out. And then one more thing, and I know I've been talking for a minute. I do want to create more paid jobs within the community, so that we do provide for paid youth jobs, because we do need more opportunities for our young folks to not just volunteer everywhere. And not everybody has the option to volunteer, and that's been an issue over and over again for most of my students. I've taught at Title I schools for the last 15 years plus. So, volunteering somewhere over the summer is a luxury not all kids have. Some kids need to get a job, and that job is at McDonald's, and for some reason that doesn't seem to carry as much weight. So I think we need to target funds into our economic justice zones communities to create more paid work that benefits the communities, and create more mentorship programs or after school programs or whatever programs. But it's not like there's a shortage of need for programming in a lot of our neighborhoods, and there's not a shortage of need for paid jobs with actual good experience that'll lead into more leadership type positions and help you get ready for college.
Great, thank you. So we are running out of time, and I want to make sure that you all get a chance to give your final closing statements before we go. So we'll just have the next few minutes for you guys to just give the final, like, why I'm running and why people who care about the things that March for Life San Diego cares about or other issues care about. So it'd be great if you could just give us your pitch.
Yeah. So I'm running because, too many times we have people in positions of power who forget who voted them into those positions of power. We have people in positions of power, and I think this forum is an example of, and I'm just going to say, I'm pissed off. Like, where are the other candidates at? Because at the end of the day, young people are and should be at the forefront of all of these issues. And when they step up and lead, we should be listening. And it shows that so many times people are so disconnected to what's really happening, so concerned about really, the establishment, and those elitists and those who they feel can get them into a position. And it becomes about themselves and not about the people. And that's why I'm running, essentially, is because I see this happen over and over again, and people are people are bossed, and we are not able to sustain the policies that many times young people are at the forefront of pushing for. And so, because people are owned by the NRA and by the police associations and the police unions, our politicians are owned by them. Why would they ever change policy that is different from what the police unions, the NRA, and the police associations want? And this goes for other special interests as well. And so we need to be putting people in positions of power who have the ability to handle the fruits and the roots at the same time. I've worked throughout this whole district and in California, whether it is around gun violence prevention, community intervention and prevention around violence, really making sure that we get things like the Crisis Act that will provide grants and resources to community-led organizations to do a lot of that crime prevention and reduction work, that rapid response work that many of us are already doing, but do it with our own resources. We need to make sure that we get things like CalVIP, and all of those resources that the state has control over, not just passing, but making sure the oversight in regards to implementation is done properly. Those are all of the things that I think you all care about, and have been consistent in, and the things in the areas in which I care about. And that is why I'm running. I'm running to make sure, I'm not too far away from you all in regards to age, but I'm also on the other spectrum. I'm right there in the middle where I can see both points of views, bring us together, and actually get things done. We have to take the politics within politics out, so we can actually get things done and get a community driven, a community interest person into that position, so we can actually get sustainable change. And that's why I'm running. That's what I want to continue to do. All of the work that I've been doing on a county and city level, I want to do on a state level, and make sure our district can actually feel, and really California as a whole can actually feel these policies that are being passed, and they are implemented in an equitable manner. So again, thank you for having me too. I'm really proud of you all, and this is just awesome.
Thank you.
So I'm running because this is just sort of a continuation of the work that I've been doing, and some of the stuff I've worked on over the last 10 years, I've helped organize parents of English learners to move a vote of no confidence for the district's plan of English learners when they did not like the one that was presented to them. A couple years ago, we helped organize to break the ban. El Cajon had made it illegal to share food with homeless people in public spaces. We went out there and ended up getting arrested, white privileged arrested. They just give us a notice to appear in court. I helped organize the Families Belong Together rally and march. And then I was also helped organize the walkout of our school for March for Our Lives. Mika and I both showed up and demanded justice for Earl McNeil in national study, and we're part of that. A couple years ago, when Border Patrol started dumping asylum seekers on the streets in the middle of the night during winter, I organized with some friends to provide food, housing, and shelter, and transportation. And ended up sponsoring a dad and his daughter for a couple of years. And that grew into a nonprofit, and we're still active today. We still are picking up asylum seekers that are getting dumped by ICE out of detention centers. And by the way, now they're dumping COVID positive people. As soon as they find out they're COVID positive people, they're dumping them. And the county out in Imperial counties, like, they don't even have a space to house everybody anymore to quarantine. During the pandemic, I've organized over 250,000 pounds of nutritious food to be delivered into some of our communities that were hardest hit by COVID and were not receiving safety net benefits from the state. And I've also been working this last year to push for San Diego to increase the number of unsheltered people who are accessing the high-risk unsheltered people who are qualified for the COVID hotel rooms that are FEMA reimbursable. And you saw last week, 3 people were killed as a car went up onto the sidewalk, and many others were hospitalized. And the majority of the people who were hit by that car qualify for one of those free hotel rooms, and they could have been staying in a hotel room basically almost for this past year if San Diego had just done the work to make that happen, the paperwork to make that happen. So at this point, I would like to, I've kind of reached my limit here. I see I'm lobbying the same people over and over again. I've gotten involved in the Democratic Party the last 2 years. I'm on the state central committee, the e-board. I would like to actually get some legislation written or look at the legislation as it's going through the process to lobby for amendments before it comes to a vote so that we get a better result for the people here in 79. And that is pretty much it. That was a lot. And I've done all this while teaching full time and being a single mom. So I would just like to take the work ethic up to Sacramento, and I feel like we could get more done with it. It's weird. It would take less work to actually get elected to get some of the work done as opposed to just fighting the after effects all the time, trying to mitigate the damage. So Shane, Suzanne, Parley, thanks for having me here today. I'm like, clearly I need some coffee right now. I'm sort of like my afternoon dying.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for both of you for coming. This has been great. And we always appreciate you taking time to talk to us about the issues that we care about. So thank you so much.
And I need to jump. I'm going to jump off and go to I have another meeting. So thank you so much for having us. And Mika, you look great. Good to see you.
Bye.
Bye. If I can find the leave button. There it is. Okay.
Yeah, well, this is the end of the forum. So thank you so much for everyone for coming.
Thank you again. Bye.
And now we're going to show Marco's video, I think. Yeah. Okay, I'll do that. Okay, due to tech issues, I'm not going to be able to share the video, but thank you all for coming. Make sure to check out our Women in Politics event on the 26th, and go follow us on social media at mfol.sandiego.com.